So the first thing that you want to do when you want to make a domain controller, we need to make sure a couple of things. This actually ran into a couple of issues the other day because some things weren't quite right. So I would have you double check under configure this local server to make sure that in fact it is called DC1. If it still has some kind of Win name or some long Windows Server DC1 or whatever, it can get confusing. I'd make sure that that is called DC1. The second thing is to make sure that you have an IP address and to make sure it's the correct IP address. IP addresses do make a difference, especially when you create domain controllers. This is going to be your primary DNS server, and everything's going to reference it. So IP addressing is very important. Make sure that it has a single number. If it says multiple addresses, that means that you have a duplicate IP address somewhere, and we have to resolve that. So don't continue on if those two things aren't there. Once you're done making sure that you're set up properly to begin with, then you can go ahead, and what we do, it's kind of a two-step process to create a domain and then make a domain controller. The first is to install the software. And the software we need to install, it's a role. The purpose of this server is to become a domain controller. So under Add Roles and Features, we can just click on the first screen. It says, be careful and know what you're doing. And we're professionals, so we can continue. It is a role-based installation, so it's just next. It's the default on the first two screens. And now if we had multiple servers, we could actually control or install stuff on multiple servers. We're going to do this later on. Right now we only have one. We're working with DC1, and I click Next again. And what we want to install is Active Directory Domain Services. And as soon as you click that, another window is going to pop up, so I'm just going to move it out to the side. So it's Active Directory Domain Services, not the certificate services. Make sure you don't click anything else. If you accidentally do, make sure you unclick it. That was another problem we had the other day, is that some other services were installed that shouldn't have been. So it's also going to bring up some extra features. They're saying, boy, if you want that role, you probably want the tools to go along with that. And absolutely we do. So we're going to make sure that it's all the defaults here. Just click Add Those Features. It does give the opportunity to add more roles. We don't want to add any more roles, though. It's best to add one role at a time. It's not a good idea. It's like, oh, I want to do this, and this. You get to the end, it doesn't work, and you don't know what didn't work. So my recommendation is to do one thing at a time. After you're done with the role list, you click on Next, and it brings up other features. So in addition to the features that it wanted to add because you installed Active Directory Domain Services, don't do anything else. Again, don't make it any more complicated than you need to. So if something goes wrong, it's going to be easier to fix and go back. Clicking Next. Active Directory Domain Services, it talks a little bit about that, things to note. Okay, we're good, and we just click Next. We want to make sure that we restart the server at the end if we need to. Let me talk about this just briefly. Be careful with this setting or step. It's possible that you don't want to do this. If it's a production server and during the day, and this is your only domain controller, there's people log on to it or whatever, you just don't want it just restarting in the next, somewhere between next 5 and 30 minutes. When it needs to restart, you might want to control it. We don't have anybody logging in. We want to make sure it restarts or whatever. What's nice about this is that you don't have to have it restart right now. You can say you want to do an upgrade or an update or install a new role, and you don't want to affect production, but you also don't want to stay all night either. So during the day, you go ahead and install the role, and then you're all set. Then 5 o'clock rolls around, everybody leaves, you click restart, and you're done. So you don't have to start the whole process. You can do it and just wait for the restart at the end. So we're going to go ahead and restart, though, just to make sure that we don't miss something that wants to restart. So I'm going to go ahead and click Install. So when it's done, we tend to be very click happy, like next. Oh, there's a close button. Let me click it. Be careful here, though, because if you actually read in the dialog or the window, it says Active Directory Domain Services, additional steps are required to make this machine a domain controller. So you've done half of it, but you have to do more, is what that's saying. There's a link here. Now, again, you know, we go click, 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 and we click close, and it's like, oh, that link is gone, never to be found again. Not true. Fortunately, they know that people are going to miss that one, so they give you a backup plan. It's an alternate way. And if you notice this little flag up on top, most of the time that's not going to be a yellow triangle. Yellow triangle means that something's going on. If it's red, then something really is going on. So always watch for those. So the notification will be yellow. If you click on the notification area, it gives you the same link again. Configuration required for Active Directory domain services on this server you happen to call DC1. And we want to promote this server to a domain controller. So we installed Active Directory, domain services, and now we're going to actually make it a domain controller. So the very first selection is, okay, you want to be a domain controller, where do you want to go? So what I'm going to do is actually kind of flip back to this screen, and it's saying, where do you want to go? So this is what you have right now, and you will be domain controller. You can be one of many places. So say this is an existing tree, forest, tree, and domain. So this is all existing already. I can be another domain controller there. That's what it says. Boy, this is going to be hard to do.
You can do it.
Well, anyway, so I can be there. I'm just another domain controller within a domain. So just a secondary domain controller. I can also be in the same tree, but a brand new subdomain. So I could go there. Where else could you go?
Another forest.
In another, well, before that,
A different tree.
in a different tree. So I could be in a different tree. So I could put myself here. So within the same forest, but in a different tree, where else could I go?
Different forest.
In a different forest. So I can make myself over here. So you have lots of different options of where you can go. But that's where this is coming from. So it's basically saying, let me get back to my screen. I'm going to add a domain controller to an existing domain. So the domain already is coming there. I'm just being another one. Another one is add a new domain to an existing forest. So the forest is there. I'm just making a new domain within it, or a whole brand new forest. Well, what do we have right now? Nothing. So what should we probably choose? Make a new forest, right? And we're just coming up with an organizational name based on an org chart that we'll be using later on, of calling gopa.com. This is called gopa.com.
Does it have to do with like Gordy and Paul?
It does exactly have to do with Gordy and Paul. Yeah. So that's where I got Gopa from. And I go ahead and click next. We have forest and domain functional levels. We're not going to talk a whole lot about that. It's kind of like versions. It's like, am I going to save this in Word 2012 format or in Word 2000 format? So it's kind of just a format type thing. And we're using the latest and greatest stuff. There is something with it. We're going to leave everything alone here. It's going to be a domain name system server. So it's a DNS server. So we're making a DNS server. It's also going to be a global catalog. We don't care about that right now. A read-only domain controller, we're not going to choose that because you need a domain controller before you can have a read-only domain controller. But we do need to enter a password. This is something that we'll never, ever use. At least I've never used it before. And if we run into an issues where we actually have to be in restore mode for directory services, I'll probably just have you recreate the server. We probably won't take the time to fix something that broken, but you do have to enter it. It does have to be a complex password, so we're going to use our capital PA $$W0RD. But since we really never use it, you can really type anything random in and just make sure you randomize the second one exactly the same way so that you can get past the screen.
So it's a random seed.
This screen is where we might run into issues. So this is what the screen should look like. It should say create a DNS delegation, and credentials for the delegation need to be created, and we're going to choose that in just a second. If you don't get this, or the check mark is uncheckable, there's an issue, and we'll have to work through that. Some things that have helped is to restart the server. I'm sorry, actually just to cancel the promotion and then go back to the notification and just re-promote. That helps some people, didn't help other people. The next option is to restart the server. And that fixed some other people's issues. And then, after that, they, some fixed and some weren't fixed. The people that weren't fixed, ultimately, they had to remove the role Active Directory Domain Services, restart the server, reinstall Active Directory Domain Services, and then that seemed to work for most of the people, all except one, where it still didn't work, and we just kept looking at it, and then suddenly it worked. Just so, not sure all the details of it. This is 2016. It's brand new. Just came out in December. It's worked for me every time so far. So I'm not sure if it's a sequencing thing or a timing thing or if it's just a random thing and I'm just going to hit it one of these days or whatever. But anyway, so this is what the screen should look like. You do have to make a change on here, though. It says no credentials are provided. It's saying that, okay, you need to have somebody that's going to allow you to do this. There is one user that's automatically created when you create a server, and which is administrator. Administrator is the account, which is like a super admin, can do everything. So that's who we're going to be using based on that local user account. The password is our special password. I'll click on the little I here so you can see that. And then I click OK. And that's how it connect the credentials. Going ahead and clicking next brings me past the DNS options. At this point, it's doing basically a search and seeing if anything out there is a duplicate name and be able to come up with a unique NetBIOS name. NetBIOS, that's how things kind of work peer-to-peer in the Windows world. It's a protocol that Microsoft's used for a while. It's still around for some things, and so it comes up with its own NetBIOS name, which is the name that we gave our domain minus the .com or .net or .edu. It's just the beginning part of it. And just leave it. It comes up with it, just leave it. Clicking next again. It comes up with folders. We have a database folder. Remember I said the database has to exist somewhere. That's where it exists. There's log file folders. It tells you where the log files are going to be, which happens the same as the database folder. And then sysval folder. That's a special one that only domain controllers have. That's a folder that's synchronized between all domain controllers. This is where group policies get kept. This is where other settings and things are put there. So if I put anything in that folder, so I could have put a picture of my cat in the sysval folder, it's going to replicate to all the domain controllers the sysval folder. It's just how it functions.
If you change it each time, so you can verify that it updated.
I don't know. Okay, click next. We're going to leave the defaults. This is the time to double check. Most importantly is the domain name. These other things, we have some flexibility on. If you get the domain name wrong, it's a mess to clean up. In most cases, you have to delete everything and then just reinstall everything. It's just not a good thing. So double check that. Once you're okay, go and click next and let it do its install. This will take a while. This is a longer process than the actual installing of the software because what it's doing is it's building the whole database structure. I'll have to click one more next. Sorry. It does a prereq check first. Yellows are okay. Reds are not. In fact, if you have any red warnings, you can't click install. You should come up with maybe one or two yellows along the way, and that's going to be okay. But anyway, if I go ahead and click next, install. Now it's going to do the install. It's going to take longer because it's building the whole database structure, which is huge. Once you start looking at what's actually being implemented, you'll see what it's all doing. It's creating a tree, it's creating a forest, it's creating a domain, it's creating users and user groups and built-in containers. So there's a lot of things that are going on structurally and database-wise in the background. So I'll just pause it here and we'll come back when it's done rebooting. Okay, so now that I now that I restarted, when I go to log in, I do a controlled insert. If you notice there's a GOPA in front of administrator, Before administrator, when it's just administrator, is a local account. So like if you go to your home computer, you just log in with your whatever username is. That's a local account. When you have a name with a slash, that's a different computer or different system. In this case, it's domain. So this administrator account is different than my local administrator account. This is the one that's on the domain. So when I go log in, it is going to use the same password. It creates a new user administrator, uses your local administrator's password, just so it has one. And when you come up, Server Manager will launch again. But what you'll notice is that it's going to have additional roles and features down here. One of them should come up with Active Directory. Active Directory Domain Services comes up. In addition to that, now we have more tools available. If you remember from last time, we probably don't, but now we have all these Active Directory administrative tools up here, including DNS and things. This is a little ahead of time. We're going to get to this next week more so. But in our Active Directory users and computers, this is the database. I clicked under Tools and then Active Directory users and computers. And it's coming. Here we go. This is my domain. And then I have users. And so here's the list of users that are automatically built, and these are like built-in accounts. And here's an administrator account. So this is the list that's in the Active Directory database that says who can log into the network. We're not looking at server-centric, we're looking at network-centric. And I can add additional people here, and we're going to do all this for the next several weeks. But that's what that's about. So I can go ahead and I'll leave this computer going. And we're going to look at our second file open, our second domain controller.
Wait, you want us to open DC2?
So now when I log in, remember all those steps that we just did to make our first server domain controller? We want to do all those steps again now from here, right after this break.
See what you did there?